Hyung-ho. Hyung-ho, who lived in a Hyundai apartment in Apajue Jongdong, Gangnam-ju, Seoul, was last seen at 5:30 p.m. on January 29, 1991, in the apartment playground. He was in the elementary school 3rd grade. At that time, according to a friend of his family, he witnessed a man talking to Lee. The friend went inside the apartment for 10 minutes, but when he came back outside, the boy and the man were nowhere to be found. That night, a man placed a threatening call to Lee's parents for a ransom of 70 million won for Lee's life. After that day, he called over a period of 43 days, over 60 times. The kidnapper first called and pretended to be a policeman and asked for another detective on scene in order to find out if they had called the police. But when the father responded that it was only his family at home, the suspect hung up. According to a voice analysis of the phone call, the man was estimated to be in his 30s. Later, the suspect called and asked for money to be dropped off at specific places throughout Seoul, but each time he never showed up to the location and was most likely watching to see who arrived. One time, after a money drop was supposed to happen, he called the household again and said, quote, "I told you not to bring anybody. No police," end quote. Each time, he called from a public phone to avoid being traced. Finally, he requested a bank transfer, but when the money was transferred to the bank, he quickly transferred it to another bank and then tried to withdraw the money from that bank. However, he was hesitant and ran away without the money. Unfortunately, no CCTV cameras were installed at the bank branch at the time, and since at the time it was possible to open an account without an ID, the kidnapper had used a pseudonym to open the bank account. There were also no fingerprints on the application form. When the kidnapper found it difficult to receive money from his bank account, he sent a final note to Lee's father and told him to put 100,000 won in a steel box near the Han River Bridge. Lee's father discussed it with police and decided to put fake money with some real ones in the steel box. The detectives were lurking around the bridge, but they confused the position of the steel box in the process of communicating it on the radio, and the kidnapper got away with the money. That night, the kidnapper called Lee's father and said, quote, "There is a lot of fake money. I guess you do not want to get your son back. However, I am grateful that you did not report to the police," end quote. 1 month after the last call of the killer, on March 31st, 1991, a child's body was found in a drainage channel next to the tunnel near the Jamisil-han River Park. It was later confirmed to be the body of Lee Hyung-ho. The police made thousands of copies of the voice tape of the killer and distributed them nationwide to no avail. Lee Hyung-ho's murder remains unsolved. Michael Carmichael and Billy Ray Hargrove. Sergeant Billy Ray Hargrove was a soldier who served in the Gulf War. His platoon was sent from Germany to Saudi Arabia and had been active in Operation Desert Storm. However, the conflict ended before their platoon saw any action. Despite this, Billy recommended his platoon for a merit award, a medal that he felt like they deserved. However, his superiors declined the recommendation. Billy then decided to forge his superior's signature on the appropriate documents. A short time later, his men received their medals. In June of 1991, he arrived in Korea for another tour of duty and was arrested at the airport by military police for forgery. Around this time, his marriage to his Korean wife, Kim, was also falling apart, and he planned to divorce her. On February 20th, 1992, Billy missed a summons to report to duty. Even after one of his fellow sergeants informed him that he was late, Billy never reported. Kim said that Billy instead took his dog for a walk that day. Shortly afterwards, Kim found Billy's body hanging from a tree in their front yard by an elastic parachute string. A suicide note was found in his pants pocket. It read, in part, quote, "My life is really screwed up now, and I just don't know how to fix it. I've been thinking a lot about taking my life for a long time now. Goodbye," end quote. Billy's family and Mike Carmichael, a fellow soldier and Billy's friend, did not believe the handwriting on the note was his. The Army acknowledged that the note might not have been in Billy's handwriting, but they still ruled his death a suicide, stating that he was depressed because of the upcoming court-martial. and the upcoming divorce. From the autopsy report, his family learned that Billy had cuts and abrasions on his face, hands, and knuckles. His mother believes that someone fought with him leading up to his death. Billy's friend, Mike Carmichael, accompanied his body back home for burial in Arkansas on March 4, 1992. On the same trip, Mike visited his uncle, Oscar Carmichael, in Nuevo, California. According to Oscar Carmichael, his nephew told him he did not believe Billy had committed suicide and that he would do his own investigation into Billy's death. 2 weeks later, on April 4, 1992, Michael Carmichael was found dead in Korea. Before his death, when Mike returned to South Korea, he and his wife, Sun-hee, visited Billy's widow Kim to collect his belongings. Mike learned that Billy had written a letter to his father, but it had never been sent to him. His father believes that the letter would have helped them determine what really happened to Billy. Mike continued to collect Billy's papers and stored them with his own papers in a metal box. Mike told his uncle Oscar that if anything were to happen to him, Oscar should immediately open the box. But Mike never said what was in it. On April 3, 1992, Mike, his wife, and his friends celebrated his 38th birthday. At 10 p.m., he received an unexpected phone call ordering him back to the base. By the next morning, he was found dead. He had been strangled by a parachute cord strung from the door handle of a metal locker inside his NCO quarters at an army barrack. Like Billy, he too had abrasions on his face and a gash on his forehead. And, like Billy, he was strangled by a parachute cord. Within a few days, the Army ruled his death a suicide, claiming that he was depressed over financial matters and over Billy's death. Mike's family does not believe this. Mike and Billy's family have joined forces in searching for the truth behind the two deaths. His uncle, Oscar, believes that Mike was too happy to commit suicide, as he and his wife had just gotten married. He believes that the similarities are not coincidental, and that the two friends' deaths are connected. Like Billy, Mike died after he was summoned back to work on an off-duty day. Both men were found hanging just inches from the ground. Both had been tied with a parachute cord, which is highly elastic. Mike's death seemed especially bizarre, as he was sitting on the floor against the locker. It seemed to be a very odd and difficult way to commit suicide. The metal box that contained Mike and Billy's personal papers was sitting on a desk across the room from Mike's body. The box of letters later disappeared. No one knows what happened to it, and military personnel deny its existence. Both families now believe that both men were murdered and that their deaths were covered up by the Army. The disappearance of the newlywed couple. Chun and Chae Sung-hee were a newlywed couple who got married in November of 2015 and lived on the 15th floor of an apartment building for 6 months in Busan, South Korea. Chae was a theater actress, and Chun had a restaurant business with a friend. In early June, Chae's father tried to contact the couple to send them some nutritional supplements, but he couldn't reach them. He then went to Chun's restaurant and asked his friend. The friend told him that Chun hadn't come to work since May 28th. Chae's father, now worried, notified the police. Police found no evidence of a home invasion or signs of a struggle inside their apartment. The couple's mobile phones, wallets, ID cards, passports, and laptops were also missing. There were groceries on the dining table, untouched. Dirty laundry, leftovers, trash were also still there. Their dog, who recently had had surgery, was still inside the apartment, unfed and with its feces all over the place. Chae was well known for taking good care of her dog. Chae was last captured on the 28th of May on CCTV footage in the apartment's elevator, carrying groceries at around 11 p.m. 4 hours later, at 3 o'clock, Chun was caught on CCTV as well. Both of them went to their room on the 15th floor. After this, no one knows what happened to them or how they left the apartment. In the apartment building where the couple lived, there were 22 CCTV cameras. However, no footage of them leaving their home was caught by any of the cameras. They simply disappeared into thin air. Chae's co-worker later came forward and told police that on the night of the 28th of May, Chae had sent her a text that she wasn't feeling well and would not be coming to work. Che's coworker felt that whomever sent these texts was not her by the way the sentences were structured. When the coworker tried calling her, her phone was switched off. On the 31st, Che's husband called the coworker and told her that Che wouldn't be coming to work for a while since she had been admitted to the hospital due to an overdose on her prescription medications. He also told the coworker that she wouldn't be able to answer any calls or texts. Later in the investigation, though, no local hospitals had any record of Che ever being admitted during that time. It was also found that Chun had done the same thing. He too had texted his restaurant partner, saying that he had something he needed to do and that he wouldn't be coming in for a month or two. On June 2nd, police traced the husband's phone to Xinjiang County, Busan, before losing the signal. The wife's phone was last traced to Hyung-ho Dong Seoul, 400 kilometers, 248.5 miles, from the husband's phone, located later in the day, before losing the signal completely. The couple was rather quiet. They did not have any debt and had average insurance policies. Their credit cards, cell phones, internet records are still quiet to this date. Savings of about $27,000 is still in their account, untouched. Later in the police investigation, it was found that Chun had another cell phone, which he used to talk to his ex-girlfriend, Yoon Mi-jin, even after his marriage to Che. After Chun and Yoon broke up, Yoon married another man and began tormenting Chun and his new girlfriend as they planned to wed. After Chun and Che got married, he maintained contact with Yoon. By this time, Yoon had divorced her husband, remarried, and was living in Norway. Police looked at Yoon's movements around the time of the disappearance. Yoon had arrived with her second husband to Korea in May of 2016, just before the couple went missing. But she left for Norway 2 weeks before her planned departure date in early June. During that time, she never used her credit card or contacted her family. Police discovered that just before returning to Korea, she had persuaded her mother to send her 10 million won for a, quote, trip to Africa. Police contacted Interpol, and Yoon was arrested in November of 2017. However, she is still in Norway to this day and has decided to appoint a local lawyer, so it will take a long time for Yoon to come to Korea before they can question her about the disappearance. Che and Chun remain missing to this day. The Sinjeong Dong Rabbit Case. On June 6, 2005, a man collecting cardboard from a trash heap discovered a large and heavy object stuffed inside 2 conjoined burlap bags and tied with a rope with a unique knot in Sinjeong, Seoul. When the man opened the bag, he found the body of a woman with a black plastic bag over her head. The victim was identified as 20-year-old Kwang Yang. Autopsy concluded that she had died of strangulation. She had been raped, and 2 sanitary napkins and toilet paper had been inserted into her vaginal area. Semen was also found at the crime scene, but the killer could not be identified. Then, on November 20th, 2005, a second victim, Lee, was found by a parking lot only 1.8 kilometers from where the first victim had been found. The body was wrapped in white cloth and tied with a rope with the same knot that was found with the first victim. And, like the first victim, the body was found in a garbage dump site and had died of strangulation. Both victims had their hands bound together with rope. Due to the unique knots used, the police believed the killer could have worked a job that had to do with packing or wrapping. No DNA of the killer was found at the crime scene or on the second body. On May 31, 2006, at approximately 12 p.m., a woman riding a taxi got off on Sinjeong Station. As she was walking towards the station, a man abducted her. The woman, Pak, was held up against a knife by the kidnapper and led to a basement room. She shouted and resisted, and when a passerby asked if everything was all right, the man said that she had drank too much alcohol. Pak was blindfolded before entering the basement room, where there was another man, possibly an accomplice, who tied her hands. After a while, the kidnapper went to the bathroom while the other was out of the room. Seeing her chance, she somehow took off her blindfold and tried to escape. She took refuge behind a shoe cupboard on the second floor of the building. She stayed hidden until she felt like the man had stopped looking for her. As the criminals went out to look for her, she ran away and found an elementary school where someone called the police for her. Park told investigators that she did not remember where she was, but did remember that there was a sticker of a cartoon character, Mashimaro, on the shoe cupboard. Based on this, it was suggested that a child in preschool or lower elementary school might be living on the second floor. She also remembered the two men talking, and one laughed that she was going to die. The abductors described as being a bit chubby, having a height between 175 and 176 centimeters, with bushy eyebrows, and was in his mid-30s at the time. After this incident, the perpetrators, who felt the risk of arrest after the victim escaped, seemingly decided to stop. There have been no leads in the case since then, and the killers remain unidentified. Lee Won-im was a 71-year-old mother who lived with her daughter in Hwaseong-si, Gonggi-do, South Korea. On September 10, 1986, Lee went to sell vegetables that she grew herself into the city of Suwon. She was never seen alive again. Later that day, when she didn't arrive home, her daughter reported her missing. 5 days later, on September 15th, at around 6:20 a.m., Lee's body was found among the rice fields, only 30 minutes away from her home. She was bound with her own clothing, sexually assaulted, and strangled to death. Little did the police know that this would be the very first of many killings by an unknown serial killer who terrorized South Korea for 5 years, from 1986 to 1991. The next murder was committed on October 20th, 1986, around 2 p.m., when the body of Park Hyung-suk, 25 years old, who was visiting a village near the marriage counseling center, was found in a farm in Hwaseong-si, Gonggi-do. The farm was only 4 kilometers from the scene of the first crime, and, just like the first victim, Park was raped and strangled using her own clothes. It wasn't until the third murder that police began to suspect that a serial killer was on the loose. On December 12, 1986, Kwon Jong-bon was raped and killed in the exact same manner as the earlier victims while returning to work. 2 days later, the body of a fourth victim, Ki Lee-suk, 23 years old, was found in a rice paddy field in Jeonggam-myeon, Hwaseong-si. Although the 4 women had been killed within a span of 2 months, police had no leads to go off. The next year, the body of Sinjeong, 19 years old, and Park Young-ju, 29 years old, was found on January 10, 1987 and May 2, 1987, respectively. Both young women had been raped and strangled. Since it was raining at the time of the murder of Sinjeong, the police were able to secure a shoe print, 245 millimeters, of the killer. The killer would then take a hiatus for more than a year, not killing again until September 7, 1988, when the body of 54-year-old An Ji-soon was found. Just as in the previous killings, she too had been sexually assaulted and strangled. On the same day, a sketch of the criminal was released. The sketch was based off of a bus driver who was at the bus stop the day that An Ji-soon, 54, was traveling. It is believed that she rode the bus with her supposed murderer the night she was killed. Then, only 9 days later, 14-year-old Park Sang-hee's body was found in her own room of her home in Gyeongdong. She too had been sexually assaulted and murdered. But this time, police arrested a man named Yoon Moo, a worker who worked at a nearby repair center, as a possible suspect. However, it was quickly found that Yoon Moo was an imposter, imitating the crimes of previous cases. The modus operandi was completely different from the previous crimes. After the arrest of Yoon Moo, the killer stopped for about 2 years and 2 months. On November 15, 1990, the killer claimed his 8th victim, 14-year-old Kim Mi-jung, was returning home from school when her body was found. She too had been bound, raped, and strangled to death. The killer had also used a razor from Kim's pencil box to inflict 38 lacerations on her chest. The last murder took place around 9 p.m. on the 3rd of April 1991. A 69-year-old woman named Kwon Soon-sang, who was visiting her daughter's home, was discovered dead, raped and strangled with pantyhose on a mountain in Hwaseong. This would be the last known killing by an unidentified serial killer and rapist, who was later called the Hwaseong serial killer. Overall, 9 bodies of women were found in a period of 4 years, age of the victims ranging from 14 to 71. All of them were gagged, raped, and all except one was murdered, usually involving parts of their own clothing. A huge investigation took place involving over 2 million police officers led to checking over 20,000 suspects. 40,000 individuals have since had their fingerprints taken. There have been 570 DNA samples and 180 hair samples were analyzed. But all of these produced very few clues. The forensic analysis typed the assailant's blood as being type B, but there was no technology in the late 1980s in Korea to make a proper DNA analysis. After samples of blood were sent from the 9th murder for analysis in Japan, they didn't match any of the suspects that the police had rounded up. The hunt for the killer became a national issue, but failed to achieve a significant breakthrough. The only description the police had to work with came from the killer's would-be 4th victim, who was raped but survived. She described the killer as a slim man in his early 20s, weighing about 75 kilograms and 5'4" to 5'6". Until it was lifted in July of 2015 by the National Assembly, the statute of limitations for murder in Korea was only 15 years. The statute for the killings had expired on April 2, 2006. However, police records were still kept due to the significance of the case. With the statute's lifting, cold cases have been revisited, and hopefully someday the Hwaseong serial killer will be caught.
On October 13, 2011, officers were called to a grocery store in Bethany, Oklahoma, after receiving numerous reports of a foul odor. When they arrived, investigators found the body of a young woman who had been hacked up and shoved into a black Nike duffel bag as well as a laundry bag. According to her autopsy report, she had been completely dismembered, with her hands and feet missing. There was evidence of duct tape having been wrapped around her thighs. Apparently, the killer or killers had also tried to remove a large tattoo on her back which read Queen Spade in order to conceal her identity. It is not clear whether she was dismembered before or after her death. Using her dental records, investigators were able to positively identify the young woman's remains as 19-year-old Karina Saunders. Karina was last seen getting inside a red dual-cab pickup at the Newcastle Casino on October 8, 2011. The guy who was allegedly driving the truck remains unidentified and is described only as having both arms covered with tattoo sleeves. It is believed that Karina may have been involved in a human trafficking ring, and her grisly murder may have been to intimidate witnesses and to force the woman to cooperate with the ring's demands. Shortly after, 2 men were arrested in the connection with the case. Jimmy Macy and Luis Ruiz, who were both suspected to be heavily involved in the drug trade, were brought in after a female witness claimed she had witnessed both Macy and Ruiz torture Saunders to death. The witness told police that she went to a house which has since been demolished with Karina, and witness Ruiz physically beat Karina and then tie her up. Ruiz then dragged Karina to an upstairs room and tied her up to a small table with a rope, before torturing her by sawing off her left foot. Ruiz then tried to cut off her right foot before the saw broke. The witness jumped out of the window to escape after witnessing the killing. A second witness later came forward and claimed that she had viewed a video on Ruiz's phone of him torturing and murdering Karina Saunders. She also claimed that she had recognized Ruiz as the person who had been seen sawing off Saunders' left foot. The video was reportedly a snuff film, which is a movie in a purported genre of movies in which a person is actually murdered, allegedly to be sold on the dark web. As of this moment, the video has not been found. Macy, while jailed on drug charges, allegedly shared details of the murder with 2 inmates. He told one that he participated in the homicide and that they cut the girl's arms and legs off. The second inmate told police Macy gave handwriting statements in the form of her past notes, describing what parts of the woman's body were dismembered and how the body was wrapped before disposal. However, both men had their murder charges dismissed without prejudice due to a lack of evidence. Ruiz was able to walk free while Macy was held on unrelated drug charges. In 2003, police received an anonymous tip that the clothing that Saunders was wearing at the time of her murder was located at 504 Oakdale Drive. The home was searched but nothing was found. Recently, in 2017, agents with the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation began digging in an Oklahoma City yard after receiving another anonymous tip that items relating to her killing might be buried on the property. After several days of searching the property, the agents reported finding several items of interest, which included a shirt, a windbreaker jacket, 2 slip-on sandals, and a folding knife. These items are still being analyzed for evidence to see if they are connected to Saunders. The case remains active and unsolved.